Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Navnita Adhikari, and with me is R.S. Raghu, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka rejects media reports that former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his family members fled to India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to participate in second Global COVID Virtual Summit on Thursday evening. India unanimously elected as new chair of Association of Asian Election Authorities for 2022-2024. In Hungary, Katalin Novak takes over as first female president of the country. India-Oman Joint Commission meeting held in New Delhi. India observes National Technology Day to mark anniversary of 1998 Pokhran nuclear tests. In IPL cricket, Rajasthan Royals set a victory target of 161 runs before Delhi Capitals in Navi Mumbai. The Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka has rejected media reports that former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his family members have fled to India. In a tweet, the High Commission termed the reports in sections of media and social media as fake and blatantly false. It added that the reports are devoid of any truth or substance. The High Commission has also categorically denied the speculative reports in sections of media and social media about India sending its troops to Sri Lanka. It said these reports and such views are also not in keeping with the position of the Government of India. On Tuesday, India said it is fully supportive of Sri Lanka's democracy, stability and economic recovery. The External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said India, in keeping with its neighbourhood first policy, has extended support worth over $3.5 billion to the people of Sri Lanka this year alone for helping them overcome their current difficulties. He said New Delhi will always be guided by the best interest of the people of Sri Lanka expressed through democratic process. The Sri Lankan Government Medical Officers Association has said that if current violent situation continues, it would lead to an increase in the number of patient admissions to hospitals that would worsen the medicines and drug shortage, which is already evident. GMOA General Committee member Dr. Prasad Columbage requested the citizens to carry out the protest in peaceful means. Meanwhile, the European Union also condemned the recent vicious attack on peaceful protesters in Colombo. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on developments in Sri Lanka. In conversation are Nirupama Rao, former Foreign Secretary, and Nilov Roy Chaudhary, journalist.
Armored personnel carriers have been patrolling the streets of Sri Lanka's major cities on Wednesday, while the nationwide curfew has been extended till Thursday to ensure that peace returns to the island nation. The country's defense secretary also clarified today that restoring peace was the government's primary responsibility. The armed forces have also barricaded President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's residence to prevent any protests from turning violent. Sri Lankans, facing their worst economic crisis ever, with shortages of fuel and food mounting, have been protesting against the president and his family members in key positions in government. They blame the government for mishandling the economic crisis and allowing the country to reach the stage that it has. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa resigned and the Sri Lankan National Assembly is due to meet on May 17th. Ambassador Nirupama Rao, what is happening now in Sri Lanka? It's extremely disturbing to see images of violence emanating from that country.
Those of us who have lived in Sri Lanka and who love that country, it is most disturbing to see the turn of events, the very dramatic turn of events in that country, and more importantly, the suffering of the ordinary people. What we've witnessed is a literal collapse of state functions, as well as the economy is in an extremely powerless, critical state, I would say. And above all, the ordinary people of Sri Lanka, I'm not talking about the wealthy people or the elite people who are resident in the upscale residential districts of Colombo. I'm talking about the ordinary people spread across the country. They are really hurting and they are really suffering, and that should be a matter of concern to India, which is really Sri Lanka's only neighbor. Between us, there is really no zone of separation except the fact that we are two different countries.
How did the peaceful protests that started over a month ago, how did these suddenly turn violent?
Well, the people have been protesting for over a month now against the government. They have focused on the lack of good governance in the country, the very high scale of corruption. Corruption, by any definition, cannot be tolerated. But in Sri Lanka, in the last few years, it seems to have exceeded all bounds and confines, literally. And this has been a verdict, literally. The people's protest has been a verdict against the Rajapaksa regime, the dynasty, as some people call it. And what is today in question is the legitimacy, the credibility of the staying power of popularly elected government. Sri Lanka is the region's oldest democracy in many ways and by every definition. But today, constitution of that country stands there, but the fact is that the state and the parliament has been unable to function. They've not been able to come up with an alternative to the crisis to see how peace can be restored, how stability can come back, and more importantly, the legitimacy of the Rajapaksa regime and their record of governance has been questioned on the streets of Sri Lanka.
Why is it that Gotabaya Rajapaksa does not accept the need to sort of step away and install somebody else in his place to try and get things going again? Because from the way things are going, it seems to me that the emphasis is more on political settlement rather than on handling the economic crisis, which is the root cause of the problem.
I would agree with you on that. I think the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the family has made some efforts to see how to diffuse the crisis by creating some joint front with the opposition. Obviously, the opposition MPs and parties are not willing to come in at a stage when nobody wants to share the blame for what has happened. Everybody quite would logically accuses the Rajapaksas for all the mishaps that have happened, all the mistakes that have happened, and the crisis that confronts the country. And nobody wants really to bail them out. And I suppose in the language of politics and in the way politics functions in much of our region, the opposition is not going to collaborate, even though this is a moment of national crisis. Everybody in the country at this moment, most people in the country, apart from the supporters of the Rajapaksa family, are crying for them, for the Rajapaksas to leave their positions, to step down. This essentially spells the political demise of that family, I believe.
Quite incredible when you think about it. I mean, barely just over 2 years, Gotabaya Rajapaksa came in with this huge majority playing on all of the majoritarian tendencies, the Buddhist chauvinism, the anti-terror, the defense security kind of aspects of what they had achieved against the LTTE. And for it to have unraveled this fast is actually quite strange, even alarming in certain ways.
When Mahinda Rajapaksa became Prime Minister in 2005, he came in at an inflection point in the country's history. The ceasefire with the LTTE was collapsing, and then the civil war recommenced in many ways around that time. And he took it upon himself to deal with the LTTE, to defeat them. And he emerged really as the victor in that civil war, kind of a new Datta Gamanu, who is supposed to be the king who vanquished the Cholas in the old days. So it was the Mahavamsa being retold all over again in many ways. And but unfortunately for the country, I think the tragedy is that the transformative moment that the end of the Civil War should have provided to the country in terms of reconciliation, bringing both communities together, was not really taken advantage of. And that really, 2009 was the year in which I believe if that transformative moment had occurred, the country would really never have looked back. It has so much going for it, Sri Lanka. There is so much potential, but it's tale of paradise lost, Nilofer. And after that, I think you had, of course, an interregnum where you had a non-Rajapaksa regime with Ranil Wickremesinghe and Maithripala Sirisena and others bringing a government of a different color to the country. But even they were really not able to solve the problems. The economy was deteriorating. And then, of course, during Easter 2019, you had the ISIS bombings all across the country, very large casualties. It was a clear case of terrorism striking in a different form. Certainly, it was terrorism unmitigated and unadulterated. And then a collapse of tourism. Then you had the pandemic. And then you had President Rajapaksa's very ill thought out, misconceived schemes like banning the import of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, introducing organic fertilizers, reducing taxes at a time, when there was no money in the country, and collapse of the agricultural sector, the collapse of the tea industry, which is so important for Sri Lanka and its exports. And of course, tourism really did not pick up because of the pandemic. So it was a perfect storm in many ways that Sri Lanka was caught in, and you're seeing the after effects of that now.
India yesterday was very quick, MEA, to bring out a statement saying that India stood completely with the people of Sri Lanka and their democratic aspirations. Despite that, there seems to be a lot of negative sort of sentiments about India on social media, certainly, with people suggesting that Rajapaksas have taken refuge in India and so on. What should India do at this point of time?
I think India should look over the head. You will always encounter this kind of anti-India sentiment within the more elite sections of the population, what you call the Colombo 7 and Colombo 3 circles in Sri Lanka. You have to look over the heads of these people, and whatever you do in terms of your diplomacy and in terms of the workings of your foreign policy, really reach out to the people at this time of grave want and difficulty for them. In many ways, I think Sri Lanka's tragedy is that the connectivity with India, despite history, despite geography, despite religion, despite ethnicity, has really not been cemented in the last few decades. Ranil Wickremesinghe was, I think, the only Sri Lankan leader who really thought in those strategic terms of how Sri Lanka and India could be more closely linked together. After the Civil War, the Indian Housing Program, we built 50,000 houses over 5 years in the districts of the north and the east of the country and in the hill country. And we provided houses, livelihoods, businesses, and that's the kind of approach we need to follow today. And I think it may not be a bad idea for the government of India to consider how we can support the people, perhaps through helping in the public distribution program, a direct work guarantee, food for work program on the model of Manrega in India. And I think we should be thinking of a people-oriented diplomacy, a people-oriented support at this time, because obviously we cannot interfere in the politics of the country. It's not going to work to our benefit, I feel, given the history of Sri Lankan politics.
Thank you so very much, Nirupama, for all of your insights, and hopefully things begin to calm down in Sri Lanka.
I certainly hope so. Thank you.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will participate in the second Global COVID Virtual Summit on Thursday evening at the invitation of the US President Joseph Biden. The summit intends to galvanize new actions to address the continued challenges of the COVID pandemic and build a stronger global health security architecture. Prime Minister Modi will deliver his remarks in the opening session of the summit on the theme Preventing Pandemic Fatigue and Prioritizing Preparedness. Secretary General of the United Nations, Director General of World Health Organization, and other dignitaries will also participate in the summit. The Prime Minister had also participated in the first global COVID virtual summit hosted by President Biden in September last year. External Affairs Ministry said India is playing a key role in ongoing global efforts to combat the pandemic by supplying safe and affordable vaccines, medicines, development of low-cost indigenous technologies, and capacity building for healthcare workers. India is also proactively engaged in multilateral fora with the objective of strengthening and reforming the global health security architecture with WHO at its center. India has been unanimously elected as the new chair of the Association of Asian Election Authorities AAEA for 2022-24 at the recently held meeting of the Executive Board and General Assembly at Manila in Philippines. The Election Commission of India, 3-member delegation headed by Deputy Election Commissioner Nitesh Vyas, along with CEO Manipur Rajesh Agrawal and CEO Rajasthan Praveen Gupta, attended the Executive Board meeting at Manila. The mission of the AAEA is to provide a non-partisan forum in the Asian region for sharing experiences and best practices among election authorities. It aims to promote open and transparent elections with the objective of supporting good governance and democracy.
In Hungary, Katalin Novak has taken over as the first female president of the country. Her predecessor, János Áder, greeted the new president at the entrance to the Sanda Palace, the residence of the Hungarian president, on Tuesday. The parliament elected Novak as president of Hungary on March 10th. The official inaugural ceremony will take place on Saturday morning at the Kossuth Square in front of the parliament. South Korea's new president, Yoon Suk-yeol, on Wednesday said the security situation on the Korean peninsula is difficult, citing talk of a possible nuclear test by the North. He made the comment during a meeting with secretaries, urging officials to stay alert to better respond in such situations.
Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal on Wednesday held a bilateral meeting and co-chaired the 10th India-Oman Joint Commission meeting with his counterpart, Qais bin Mohammed Al Yusuf. In a tweet, Mr. Goyal said he discussed on strengthening economic ties in multiple sectors as India seeks greater trade cooperation with the Gulf Cooperation Council following India-UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Welcome back to World News. In India, the National Technology Day is being observed on the 11th of May. The day marks the anniversary of the Pokhran nuclear tests in 1998. It is celebrated every year to commemorate the achievements of innovations and technological excellence in the country. The celebration of National Technology Day symbolizes India's quest for scientific inquiry, technological creativity and innovations, and the integration of these developments into national socio-economic benefits and global presence. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi have greeted scientists on National Technology Day. India's Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu has described Prime Minister Narendra Modi as a leader who demonstrated to the world that dreams can be realized. Launching Modi at 20, Dreams Meet Delivery book at a function in New Delhi on Wednesday, he said, Mr. Modi has over the last 20 years carved out a unique place in the history of post-independent India while being the Chief Minister of Gujarat for about 13 years and over the last 8 years as the Prime Minister.
Admit you all and also release this important publication about various aspects of personality and administration of our Prime Minister, Sri Narendra Bhai Modi. After going through it, I can say these distinguished authors have contributed to this excellent publication in a well-articulated manner so as to make the nation know about the great thoughts and deeds of the great man. I compliment each of these writers on their incisive analysis and cogent presentation. They have masterfully traced the contours of an iconic leader's fascinating journey of 20 years. It really was fascinating.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said Prime Minister Narendra Modi has practiced development-focused diplomacy. He said Mr. Modi focused on border infrastructure development to meet security challenges.
Today, when I look at what is the difference that he has made, he has really led a foreign policy which is much more security focused. He has practiced a diplomacy which is more development focused. He has created people-centric policies in foreign policy. And he has run a foreign policy of a civilizational state.
15th round of India-Uzbekistan Foreign Office consultations were held on Wednesday in New Delhi. The consultations were co-chaired by Secretary West in Ministry of External Affairs Sanjay Verma and Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Uzbekistan Furqat Siddiqov. The last round of Foreign Affairs was held in virtual format in November 2020. During the consultations, both sides undertook a comprehensive review of the state and prospects of bilateral cooperation, including political, security, trade, economic, connectivity, development partnership, humanitarian and cultural spheres. The talks particularly focused on greater economic cooperation and steps to enhance connectivity between India and Uzbekistan. Both sides agreed to exploit the full potential of Chabahar port for trade between the two countries. The two sides exchanged views on regional and international issues of mutual interest, including Afghanistan. They agreed to further enhance cooperation in the UN, SCO and other multilateral fora. Indian side conveyed its full support for Uzbekistan's ongoing chairmanship of SCO. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has accused the United States on Wednesday of waging a proxy war against Russia after the House of Representatives approved a $40 billion aid package for Ukraine. Writing on the messenger app Telegram, Mr. Medvedev said that the bill approved by the House of Representatives on Tuesday was a bid to deal a serious defeat to Russia and limit its economic development and political influence in the world. He said it won't work and the U.S. economy would suffer. Russia's State Duma Speaker Volodin accused Washington of using the aid package to indebt Ukraine and of appropriating the country's gain reserves in lieu of payment.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has asked regional officials to deal with forest fires in Siberia. He said there could be no repeat of last year's fire season, the worst on record. In an online meeting, he said he cannot allow a repeat of last year's situation when forest fires were the most long-lasting and intensive of the recent years. India's Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Bhupendra Yadav, has emphasized that land plays a fundamental and cross-cutting role in achieving several of the Sustainable Development Goals. He said meeting the target set under SDGs goals can help accelerate tree cover, soil conservation and transition towards sustainable agriculture production. Mr. Yadav delivered a national statement at the 15th session of the Conference of Parties of United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, UNCCD, on Wednesday.
An Indian delegation led by Agriculture Minister Narendra Singh Tomar on Tuesday visited Agricultural Research Organization, Volcani Institute of Israeli Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. The domain experts made a presentation before the Indian delegation on various areas of advanced agricultural research, precision agriculture, remote sensing and post-harvest technology. Directorate of Revenue Intelligence has seized 62 kilograms of heroin with estimated worth of 434 crore rupees at air cargo complex of Indira Gandhi International Airport in New Delhi. This is one of the biggest seizures of heroin till date through courier and cargo air passenger mode in India. The DRI officers have apprehended the importer of the offending consignment and other suspects are also being interrogated. The offending cargo, originating from Entebbe in Uganda, had arrived at the air cargo complex in New Delhi via Dubai. Talking to All India Radio, DG DRI Alok Tiwari said the heroin was seized from an imported cargo consignment which was declared to contain trolley bags.
The drugs had been ingeniously concealed inside the hollow metal tubes of the suitcases which had been imported from Uganda. In an immediate follow-up action, around 7 kgs of heroin was additionally recovered by our officers 2 places in Punjab and Haryana, along with 50 lakh cash. So the total value of this 62 kgs of heroin which has been seized is estimated to be around 434 crores in the illicit market. In addition, last month the DRI officers seized 201 kilograms of heroin at Kandla port and another 395 kgs of heroin mixed with thread or sutli at Pipavav port.
In IPL cricket, Rajasthan Royals have set a victory target of 161 runs before Delhi Capitals at Dr. D.Y. Patil Stadium in Navi Mumbai. In reply, Delhi Capitals were 114 for 1 in 15 overs when reports last came in. Earlier, Delhi Capitals won the toss and opted to field first. In badminton, Indian men and women's teams lost their matches on the final day of their group stage encounters of the Thomas and Uber Cup at the Impact Arena in Bangkok, Thailand on Wednesday. In Thomas Cup, India lost their third group match against Chinese Taipei 2-3 on Wednesday, while in Uber Cup, Korea blanked India 5-0. Both the Indian men's and women's badminton teams have already secured their places in the quarterfinals after notching some fantastic tie wins in their group stage matches.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let's have a look at the press reports on China. Prasar Bharati Beijing reports SCO's Secretary General Zhang Ming hailed India for sharing Yoga India's cultural heritage as India is set to take up SCO presidency in September 2022. PTI reports China on Tuesday said it is closely following the violent turn of events in Sri Lanka, where it has substantial investments, and asked the Chinese nationals working in the island nation to be alert and on guard against risks. The Guardian reports the head of the World Health Organization has voiced concerns over China's efforts to eliminate the COVID virus in a rare rebuke to Xi Jinping's pledge to achieve dynamic zero COVID. CNN writes the U.S. intelligence community believes that China is actively attempting to build a military capable of taking over Taiwan, even in the face of U.S. support for the island, top U.S. intelligence officials told Congress on Tuesday.
Now let's have a look at the press reports on Nepal. The Rising Nepal reports that according to the Airlines Operators Association of Nepal, no airline will fly on Friday, the day of the local election, to any destination inside the country. Khabar Hub has published a report on Nepal and Israel bilateral relations. Ambassador of Israel to Nepal, Hanan Goder, has said that Israel and Nepal share the same values of tolerance, democracy, community solidarity, and respect for each other. The Rising Nepal has also reported this news. Khabar Hub has published a report on an international webinar on China using education as the last tool of colonizing Tibetan minds. Now, let's have a look at the press reports on Pakistan. The Express Tribune writes that the ceasefire reached between the Pakistan Army and the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan TTP on the account of Eid al-Fitr has been extended by the latter for another 5 days. Dawn reports that about a dozen women protested in the Afghan capital on Tuesday against the Taliban's new verdict that females must fully cover their faces and bodies when in public.
Now let's have a look at the press reports on Bangladesh. Bangladesh Information and Broadcasting Minister Hassan Mahmood came down heavily on Amnesty International, Transparency International Bangladesh and Reporters Without Borders for their biased take on human rights, press freedom and corruption in Bangladesh, reports Daily Star. The Bangladesh Bank on Wednesday dismissed news of red-coloured TK1000 notes being scrapped as simply a rumour, reports Dhaka Tribune. A look at the headlines once again. Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka rejects media reports that former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his family members fled to India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to participate in second global COVID virtual summit on Thursday evening. India unanimously elected a new chair of Association of Asian Election Authorities for 2022-2024. In Hungary, Katalin Novak takes over as first female president of the country. India-Oman Joint Commission meeting held in New Delhi. India observes National Technology Day to mark anniversary of 1998 Pokhran nuclear tests. In IPL cricket, Rajasthan Royals set a victory target of 161 runs before Delhi Capitals in Navi Mumbai. And now before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favourite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Senegal. that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.